50 Strat presents Hearthstone. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is 50, and today we're going to be talking about Hearthstone. I'd like to welcome you to part 2 of the 3-part Intro to Hearthstone series, and today we're going to be talking about deck building. In part 1 of the series, we covered the rules of Hearthstone for any new players, and in part 2 today, we're going to go through how to build a deck in Hearthstone and sort of walk through the process together, because deck building is very important. I mean, that's essentially the whole kind of point of the game. You build a deck and you play the decks against each other. So before we get into the actual deck building, I wanted to talk a little about, I guess, the ground foundation information that you'll need. In any card game, regardless of whether it's Hearthstone or Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh or whatever, there are two types of primary deck archetypes. The first one is aggro, and the second one is control. With aggro decks, they focus on fast pressure, and generally rely on a lot of creature cards to do as much damage as possible as fast as possible. It's really like a balls to the wall type strategy where you basically try to beat your opponent before they can beat you. Aggro decks are a little more favorable for newer players because it doesn't require an extensive knowledge of the game or of all the other types of cards out there, of all the potential scenarios you can run into, because you're not really thinking about that. You're just thinking about how I can do as much damage as fast as possible. The other deck archetype is control. Control is like a little more advanced, and it focuses on dictating the pacing of the game through spells and creatures, and eventually you end it with a very powerful card or a bunch of powerful cards when your opponent's in an unfavorable position. So basically you grind it out, you counter and have a response for everything that your opponent does, being annoying and just aggravating, and then at the end when they just don't have anything left, you drop your huge creature or spell or whatever and end it there. Control decks do require some knowledge of the game because you need to know which cards to expect, which cards your opponent most likely has in their deck, and other general knowledge like that. So it's a little tougher for beginner players, but as you start learning the game and picking up on some of the I guess like the meta game and stuff, and whatever card game you're playing, control decks are very fun. Now the majority of decks they fall somewhere in between control and aggro. There aren't too many decks that are full aggro or full control. You generally have aspects of both, but regardless of what deck you're playing, there's three essential pieces to any good deck. Those three are your early game, your mid game, and your end game. Your early game cards are cards that you want to play in the first few turns of the game. These are cards that set the pace for the rest of the match. They may be cards that help you draw cards, or cards that are cheap and start doing damage as fast as possible for aggro decks. And these early cards need to lead up into your mid game. Your mid game cards are going to be the stuff. They're really the bread and butter of your deck. These are the cards that you use to, I guess, execute your ultimate strategy. In aggro decks, your mid game is basically going to be a bunch of strong cards that you use to deal damage with. In control decks, these mid game cards might be stuff that help set you up for the late game, or these may just be stuff that prevent your opponent from gaining tempo. And then finally, your end game is your win condition. It's going to be the card that you use to close out the game. These are generally your very expensive creatures, your creatures or spells. These are the cards that you rely on to finish off your opponent. Your early game and your mid game all lead up to your end game. So these three types of cards are very important to any type of deck because it allows you to transition smoothly as the game goes on. And if you have a deck that's only full of early game cards or mid game cards or even end game cards, it just doesn't work out very well. If you only have early game / mid game cards, you're eventually going to fizzle out because your opponent's going to drop his end game creatures and you're not going to be able to respond. Alternatively, if you only have end game cards, it's going to be impossible or very difficult for you to survive early on because you're holding on to these very expensive and strong creatures, but you're not going to be able to play them. So You need a good mix of both, and you need to understand sort of how the pacing of your deck works. It's not always the same. For example, an endgame card for an aggro deck might be a turn 6 or turn 7 card, whereas an endgame card for a control deck might be a turn 8, turn 9, turn 10 type of card. So let's go and start building some of these decks. Today I have 2 decks prepared, a control deck and an aggro deck. Now that we have the basics of deck building out of the way, let's go in and start building the decks themselves. The first deck that we're going to do today is the control deck, and for that we're going to use the Hunter hero. The reason why we're using the Hunter is because Hunters have a lot of cheap, easy to obtain cards that are very effective, that are just great for control, and I don't know, they're just so annoying. They're so good. A warning to the wise, anyone that does play a Hunter should know that they're just really hated right now on the ladder, which is bizarre because they were really bad for like a period of time, and then all of a sudden like these Hunter control decks started becoming like all the rage, and you'll see it. Just go on any Hearthstone forum and you'll see at least 3 to 4 threads just about Hunter QQ. Anyway, with that out of the way, you could now be one of those annoying Hunters on the ladder. The reason I named this deck Beastaker is because there's a North American player named Beastaker. He hit very high on the legend rankings using a Hunter deck, and we're gonna build a similar, I guess, variant of his deck. Although we're gonna remove some of the rare cards and replace them with more affordable cards, since this is really a show meant for, or a guide rather, meant for newer players. So I just assume that newer players don't have all the cards that, say, a legend rank player will have in his collection. So with that out of the way, let's go over, I guess, the philosophy behind the Hunter control deck. The way that the Hunter control deck works is you don't really have too much early game presence, but you just use your hero power to slowly whittle away at their health. You also have a bunch of removal cards that are cheap and very effective, and you use that to make sure that your opponent doesn't gain advantage, especially in the early game. Come mid to late game, you have a combo called the Unleash the Hounds combo, and I'll go over that a little more in detail later, but that's sort of the combo that you use to gain insane advantage over your opponent. And then through that advantage, you start, well, one, you remove all threats from your opponents by your removal, and then you summon a handful of creatures of your own that just are really efficient, that trade well, and then you just whittle them down slowly to 0 or until they leave out of anger, which is always fun. So with that, let's start going through some of these cards and figuring out, what we're going to start putting in. I think the first thing we'll do is we'll just start putting in some removal spells. Let me just go through and put in every removal spell that we have. Let's see, Hunter's Mark, Arcane Shot. I'll add the secrets later. I guess these are technically removal, but those are kind of in their own category. So same with Snipe, Unleash the Hounds. Where is the other removal? Deadly Shot, Kill Command. All this, like you see here, Hunters have a ton of removal. I guess that's everything. So yeah, right now we have 12 slots, 12 cards that are pure removal. Taking a look, Hunter's Mark is just a really strong card, so we're going to keep this in. This is really effective late in the game, where you can change a minion's health to 1. So a really strong creature, like say like a Ysera or a Ragnaros, you can Hunter's Mark them for 1 and then take them out easily with one of your minions. Arcane Shot. Now let's take a look at Arcane Shot. Arcane Shot is a really cheap spell. It's 1 for 2 damage, which is pretty standard, but when we go through and take a look at these other removal spells, Arcane Shot just doesn't really feel as powerful or needed, so we're going to take these out for now. Deadly Shot is another really powerful removal spell. Like I said, this deck does a really good job of keeping board control. So your opponent, I guess the goal is to have your opponent start playing 1 card at a time, or just limit them to play in that style. And Deadly Shot just becomes really powerful when they start doing that. So we're going to keep these in. Same for Kill Command. It's just a really powerful spell that has great synergy with the fact that you're going to have a lot of beasts in your deck. Multi-Shot. Multi-shot is pretty good. I guess this does a decent job of maintaining board control, but the fact that it's kind of situational makes me want to remove it. If you take a look at the text, it says it deals 3 damage to 2 random enemy minions, meaning you can't play this card unless there's at least 2 minions on the board. So like I said, the point of this deck is to keep board control, and I feel like there are going to be times where multi-shot is it's like a dead card in your hand because you can't play it, and for that reason we're going to remove it for now. Explosive Shot, I really like Explosive Shot. It's a great card, and I don't know, we're just going to keep it. It's a great card. And the thing with Explosive Shot is it doesn't necessarily rely on having multiple creatures on the board like Multi-Shot does. I know the text says deal 5 damage to a minion and 2 damage to adjacent ones, but if there are no adjacent minions, this just deals damage to that one minion. So it's not really as situational or a dead draw like Multi-Shot might be. So now that we have the removal in hand, let's go through and take a look at the secrets. So I'm gonna add all the secrets we have. I'm not gonna add Snake Trap because this is an epic card, meaning it's a little rare. So not like everyone might have a Snake Trap. So let's ignore this for now. If you do have it, I'll talk about it just, to see if this is something that you might want to consider. Okay, traps. Hunters have a lot of really annoying traps / secrets. Explosive Trap is great in the early game. This is basically like a board clear in the early game. It deals 2 damage to all enemies, including the enemy hero. So early in the game, when you have a lot of weak minions, like 1 health minions, 2 health minions, this is really strong. So I'm going to hold on to this. Freezing Trap. I really like Freezing Trap. I think it's a great card, especially in the mid to late game, where if you bounce a creature, and if it forces your opponent to spend 2 additional mana on it. It's really great with a 9 mana card because basically at that point your opponent can't play it because it'll cost them 11 mana, and you can only have a max of 10 mana. But the fact that it just messes up with their tempo. Like if you have a Chillwind Yeti out for 4 mana and it gets bounced to their hand, it's not going to cost them 6, meaning it's not really, at that point, it's not as strong of a play like as it was on turn 4. So Freezing Trap we're going to keep in. One thing about Freezing Trap is most players, especially as you get to like a higher rank or lower rank, I guess, they'll know to expect this, and they'll try to play around it by sending their cheap minions first. So you need to do some thinking when playing Freezing Trap, like make sure you have the proper removal out, make sure they only have expensive creatures out before you play a Freezing Trap. You don't want to just waste this on like a 1 mana, minion or something like that. Misdirection. When a character attacks your hero, instead he attacks another random character. Now this means they can, like, say your opponent attacks with a 4/4. That 4/4 could either attack one of his creatures, one of your creatures. It could attack, the person, like the hero that originally attacked. So it's kind of useful, but it's really random. It's situational, and for that reason, I don't like it. I just feel like it's better to stick with cards that you kind of have a better, I guess, a solid understanding of the outcome with. Basically, like a card that like what's going to happen when it triggers or when you play it. And Misdirection isn't really one of those cards. And since we only do have 30 deck slots and we still need to add a bunch more cards, I'm going to remove Misdirection for now, just because, like I said, it's a little situational. Snipe is very good. It's a very strong secret. When basically what it does is, as soon as your opponent plays a card, it deals 4 damage to it. The only downside to Snipe is, similar to the other traps, your opponent will learn to try to play around them, and what they'll do is they'll play like a really cheap minion, and then it could potentially waste a Snipe on like a 1/1 or something. But because hunters have so many secrets, it's sort of hard for them to always be able to do that. And it could potentially screw up their tempo by forcing them to wait an additional turn or like spend additional mana to play a creature to work around Snipe or something like that. So I mean, Snipe is very good. It's a secret I enjoy, and we'll just keep it in for now. We might end up cutting it, and I'll explain why in a little bit, but let's just keep it in for now and see what happens. Now I'm gonna quickly go over Snake Trap. Snake Trap is really cool. When one of your minions is attacked, you summon 3/1/1 snakes, which are also considered beasts, I believe. Snake Trap does have decent synergy with Starving Buzzard and Scavenging Hyena. So I mean, it's an interesting card. You might, that you might play with, but I personally feel like this is better in an aggro hunter-y deck opposed to a control hunter. And this I wouldn't want to take up one of the slots for a secret for a Snake Trap. It's not a bad card. It's very good. So if you have one, play around with it. But otherwise, I don't know. I just don't feel like it's worth it, at least in this deck. So now that we have those, we're gonna go ahead and add in Eaglehorn Bows. The reason why we're adding these in is they're just so good when you have secrets in a hunter's deck, which is pretty much always. Whenever a secret's revealed, this gains an additional durability, meaning it stays alive for a long time, at least potentially. It's pretty self-explanatory. Right now we have 6 secrets. I mean, it's almost like necessary to have 2 Eaglehorns at this point. So now that we have all those in there, let's start adding creatures. The first creature we're going to add is Timberwolf. Let's see, is there anything else? Nope, Timberwolf. We add Timberwolf here because it's very good. We have lots of beasts. It boosts the beasts up. Solid creature. What else do we have? Unleash the Hounds. Now, this isn't technically a creature, but, it summons creatures, and this is a staple to nearly every and any hunter deck, so it's almost an automatic add, and I'll go into a little more detail about this later. On top of this, Scavenging Hyena and Starving Buzzard. These are must adds. Scavenging Hyena, it goes very well with Unleash the Hounds. What you do is you wait for your opponent to have a bunch of creatures on their board, play Unleash the Hounds while you have either Scavenging Hyena or Starving Buzzard out on the field, or both. That'd be like a dream situation. And then you take those hounds and just hit your opponent with them, or hit their minions with them and clear their minions. And as each hound dies, your Scavenging Hyena gets insanely big. So for example, if they have 3 creatures on the board and you sacrifice all 3 hounds, like ram those 3 hounds into their 3 creatures, your Scavenging Hyena is now going to be a +6/+3, meaning it's an 8/5. As you can see, math is not really my strong point, but 8/5. I mean, that's huge, and it's really not uncommon for your opponent to have 3 creatures on the board. So it's not even like this combo is particularly difficult to pull off. Starving Buzzard. Every time a beast is summoned, you draw a card. If you read the text here, you summon the hounds, which are beasts. So for each hound that you summon, if you have a Starving Buzzard out, you draw that many cards. So in the scenario from before, if they have 3 minions and you play Unleash the Hounds, you draw 3 cards through Starving Buzzard. I mean, that just will give you ridiculous hand advantage. And I mean, this Unleash the Hounds combo is just so strong. You need to have, this is the core of your deck, really. Moving on, Animal Companion. This just summons a random beast companion. You get a 4/4 taunt, a 4/2 charge, or a 2/4 bird thing that boosts up the attack of your other creatures, I believe. All those creatures are good, so we're just going to add these in. It's just something, it just summons a beast. It's good. Don't worry about it. Houndmaster. We're going to add Houndmasters because every creature we have apart from Houndmaster right now is a beast. So this just boosts up your beasts and gives them taunt. So it sort of protects you from really aggressive decks. It'll stop their tempo a little bit, and in the late game, boost giving your friendly beast +2/+2 will allow you to put on some more offense. So Houndmaster is a good card. And then Savannah Highmane. We're going to add the Savannah Highmane because this is one of the strongest cards in the Hunter's repertoire. It's just a very solid creature, and the fact that it has a death rattle gives it a little longevity, making it very annoying for a lot of people to deal with. So let's just keep that in. We'll just keep that in for now. Okay, so let's take a look and... oops, what happened? Okay, so let's take a look at our deck right now. Taking a look at our curve, it's pretty solid. We have a lot of 2 and 3 mana cards, meaning this deck is very light in terms of in terms of mana requirements, but that's really not a problem. The whole point of this deck is you sit back and then mid game you just play a bunch of creatures at once. So that said, some stuff to keep in mind is Timberwolf, Hyena, Buzzard. These are all cards that you want to wait until you can play together. Like, never play a Timberwolf on turn one. It's just not good. So just don't do that. And let's see. I mean, that's pretty much how the deck works. You wait, you annoy them with all your traps and secrets, and then you get board control with your Unleash the Hounds and hand control with Unleash the Hounds. You use the Eaglehorn Bow to start removing their creatures. Animal Companion just gives you additional beasts. Boost them, pump them up with Houndmasters and Timberwolves. Savannah Lion for the win, and then, use your hero ability to slowly whittle them down. So that's the beast portion of the deck, or rather the control deck that we built here. This is a very strong card, a very strong deck. It's very cheap. As you can see here, there's only 1, 2, 3. There's only 3 rare cards, and everything else is either free or uncommon. So this is very cheap to build, very easy, and you'll probably get a lot of success with this deck. It's a very, I guess, in terms of control decks, it's very easy to pick up. You don't have to do too much thinking, but yeah, I mean, just keep playing with this deck, and it does take some time to get used to. It's not like an aggro deck where you can just play cards as they come. You need to hold them back a little bit and just know when to strike, basically. This is a very precision type deck. All right, so the next deck that we're going to do is the Warrior, and rather the Aggro Warrior deck. Aggro decks are very, like balls to the wall type decks. This deck is going to be a deck that just does not care what's on the board. Like you can go in and just almost always completely ignore what's on their board. I mean, no, I shouldn't say that. You can. Your first priority should be dealing damage, and then your second priority should be being more concerned about what your opponent has, opposed to the Hunter control deck, which is sort of reversed. That said, we're not going to really focus too much on removal, because removal is not really as important in an aggro deck, because, I mean, the whole point is to kill them before they kill you, right? So there's no time to play removal spells. No one got time for that. What we're going to do is start adding the boost pump cards for your aggro-y strategy. So the first one here is Inner Rage. So what this does, it deals 1 damage to a minion and gives it +2 attack. So this pumps up creatures. We're going to add the Whirlwind, and I'll explain why in a little bit. While we're here, let's just add the Fiery War Axe. This is just one of the strongest 2-drops in the game. You can use this. Your primary use for Fiery War Axe should be to pick off taunts and early pressure from your opponent. I know I just said you're not too concerned about what's on your opponent's board, but if they have something that you need to just bust through, I mean, Fiery War Axe is going to be your weapon of choice. All right, going through, what else is there? Heroic Strike. I'm not a fan of Heroic Strike. I really don't like this card. But let's just add it in for now and see if we decide to keep it or not. Rampage, I don't like this because it's situational. We do have a lot of cards here that deal damage to our own minions, meaning Rampage might be okay, but I'm going to pass on this for now. If we do need some additional boost, we can come back to it, but I'm just not a fan. Cruel Taskmaster, this is basically Inner Rage in a creature form, so we'll add those in. Frothing Berserker. Whenever a minion takes damage, it gains attack. As you see here, we have a lot of creatures that do deal damage. So this is very strong. And unlike, say, Rampage, which is a little situational, this one's not really situational. You can still play it even if you have no damaged minions on the board. And it's just going to be a giant magnet for your opponent. As soon as you see this, he's going to get concerned. He's going to want to pick this off as soon as possible. So it does a good job. It protects you a little bit in a sense. It's like a taunt, but not really. We're going to add the Arathi Weaponsmith because I just really like the value that this provides. It gives you a free weapon, and it also it's a 3/3 body. It's not bad. We'll add the Core Crown Elites because it's a charge, a 4/3 charge. Nothing to, it's pretty solid. Arcanite Reaper, it's a very powerful weapon. So we'll add those. Gorehowl is, I would normally add this in this deck, but because we're going for a more budget build, we'll skip Gorehowl for now. So as you see, we don't have nearly as many cards as we need to finish this deck. So let's take a look at some neutral cards, starting with the 1 mana cost. We'll add an Abusive Sergeant. I like Abusive Sergeant. It gives a minion +2 attack, and it just goes well with our theme when it comes to aggro. So let's add this. Some other cards here, nothing really that I'm liking so far. I like Leper Gnome in an aggro deck. It's a turn 1 move that you can do, and the Death Rattle deals 2 damage, meaning it's basically like 4 damage potentially for 1 mana, and even more. I mean, if you can get 1 hit in with Leper Gnome, it's just all worth it. It's just such good value. So we'll add him in for now. Nothing else that really looks too good here. We'll add Armani Berserkers. I like the Berserker. I just think it goes well because we have Inner Rage and Whirlwind to trigger the Enrage, and it also combos, the fact that we have Enrage also combos well with Frothing Berserker. So we'll add these in. Let's take a look. Dire Wolf Alpha is not bad. It gives your adjacent minions a +1 attack, but I feel like it's a little slow in this deck. You're not really trying to set up anything. We're just going straight for the face, so we'll skip that for now. Fairy Dragon is a very strong card. It's 2 for a 3/2 that can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. So we'll add this for now. This is a pretty strong card in even control type decks because it's hard for your opponent to really deal with this, especially that early in the game because it can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. So what are they going to do? They need to start ramming their minions into it. Loot Hoarder. Let's add in Loot Hoarders. I like Loot Hoarder. It's a 2/1, so there's a little aggro-y aspect to it for 2 mana. And the biggest issue when it comes to aggro decks is the fact that you run out of cards very quickly. You're playing so fast and furiously that you don't have any cards in a matter of a few turns, and Loot Hoarder just helps us do that by giving us the extra draw. Novice Engineer serves the same purpose, but it's a 1/1. It seems a little vulnerable, a little weak. So I'm gonna pass on the Novice Engineer. Acolyte of Pain. I really like Acolyte of Pain here, actually. I think it makes sense to add Acolytes of Pain because it could potentially draw us more than 1 card. And the fact that we have Inner Rage and what's the other card? Cruel Taskmaster. That could work really well with Acolyte. So we'll keep this in. In fact, now that we've added Acolyte, let's remove Loot Hoarders because we were at the 30 card limit, and there are definitely some more cards that I'd like to add. So we'll get rid of the Loot Hoarder, and we can always adjust after a few games if we feel like this is really lacking in draw. In fact, now that we're at 28 cards, let's go through and see if there's anything that we can remove because there are definitely more than 2 cards I want to add here. Inner Rage we'll keep. I think it goes well with a lot of these cards that we have. Same for Whirlwind. Maybe we can cut on 1, cut down to 1 Whirlwind, but we'll see. Abusive Sergeant, we'll keep this in. I like the boost. Leper Gnome. I like Leper Gnome. I like him. But does it make sense to keep him? We really don't have too many turn 1 plays, and I feel like he's probably a very good turn 1 play for us, so let's keep him for now. Fiery War Axe we're going to keep. Heroic Strike. I was thinking about keeping Heroic Strike because we have so many weapons. We have the War Axe, the Arcanite Reaper, and then the the Weaponsmith. But if there is a card that we need to remove, I guess it'd be Heroic Strike. So let's get rid of that. I'm gonna keep the Berserker. We'll keep the Cruel Taskmaster. I might get rid of the Fairy Dragon. I like it. It's probably one of the strongest turn 2 plays that we have. But we have a couple solid turn 2 plays already in the War Axe and the Berserker. And the thing with Fairy Dragon is, man, I don't know. It's so good. It's kind of hard to remove it. We'll revisit this. Acolyte of Pain, like I mentioned, I like to draw, so I'll keep him. Frothing Berserkers. I think there's a lot of damage that's gonna be going out, so I feel like it's worth it. The Weaponsmith, like I said, I like the value. Elite, I like him. All right, let's just keep going and see and cut cards when we need to. Nothing there that I really like. I like Fleshing Ghoul, but once again, I feel like this is a little slow for this deck. Oh, Raging Worgen. Yes, definitely need to add Raging Worgen. It not only has the Enrage, but it also has Wind Fury when it's enraged, and that's just way too good. We need to add him in. Shattered Sun Cleric. I feel like this would be cool. You get to boost up cards. You can use this on even like an Acolyte of Pain, giving it an additional potential for draw. But I don't know. I feel like that's kind of slow. Tauren Warrior. This is pretty decent, but it's a little slow as well. Being a turn 3 Cardinal. I like Yeti, but I don't know if we have the space for Yeti. I like Cult Master too. This is some more draw that we can use, but we might have to skip out on those. Dark Iron, man, I feel like we have to add Dark Iron Dwarves. They're just too sturdy. They're 4/4s. They're hard to kill, and then the fact that it gives a minion +2, that gives us potential for some decent damage. I feel like with Dark Iron Dwarf, maybe Abusive Sergeant isn't necessary, but Abusive Sergeant is only 1 mana. I like that. Oh man, let's see if I run into anything else that I really like. Leroy Jenkins would be perfect for this deck if you have one. It's a legendary, so I won't include it in this build. Yeah, nothing I'm seeing in the 5s yet. Oh man, Gurubashi Berserker. We need to add this. He's so good. Like this, his effect is like an enrage type effect, but it can be triggered more than once on like enrage. Like for enrage, where'd he go? This can only happen once. Like he can't get double Wind Fury, and he won't ever get +2 attack, from his own abilities. But with Gurubashi Berserker, each time he takes damage, he gains 3 attacks. So I mean, this is too good. All right, we need to get rid of something. I feel like the charge is worth it. The weapon makes it worth it. If there's a card that we have to get rid of, it might have to be Fairy Dragon. But man, Fairy Dragon's so hard to deal with. Fairy Dragon, 3/2. What other turn 2 plays? Yeah, I guess we'll get rid of him, and this is why. We already have a couple good turn 2 plays in the War Axe, the Berserker, and potentially no, he's not really a turn 2 play. We only have 2. Oh man, now I feel crappy about removing him. But this is too good. We'll add the Gurubashi Berserker. We're gonna be in big trouble if we run into something else that we want to. Yeah, Argent Commander. I feel like Argent Commander is needed in this deck. It has a charge. It has a charge. It has the charge. See, the charge and the Divine Shield. The Divine Shield helps clear the way for some of the fat taunts. I mean, it's just such a good card, especially in an aggro deck. Should I get rid of the Weaponsmith? I like the Weaponsmith because by giving your hero a weapon, it basically is like summon an additional creature that can't be killed. And I like that. Dark Iron Dwarf I like too much. Should I get rid of the Corcoran Elites? Oh man. It's really hard getting rid of the Elites because they're so good. Arcanite Reaper? No, that's too good to get rid of. I might get rid of the Abusive Sergeant. Yeah, let's do it. We'll get rid of the Abusive Sergeants. I like Abusive Sergeant, like I said, but we already have a ton of cards that boost up our creatures. And I feel like it's not needed. I like Argent Commander. I don't know how I feel about that decision, but we'll do it. Let's see. All right. So that's our aggro warrior deck. With the aggro deck, it's not like the hunter deck where you're really holding back on cards. I mean, you want to play Leper Gnome turn one. Unless you're against a mage or a druid, it gets a little iffy. Against a druid, I feel like it's a little worth it because you deal a total of basically 3 damage for 1 mana, which is better than the traditional 2 damage for 1 mana. Because the warrior will armor up, get the 1 attack, the druid rather, will armor up, get the 1 attack, and then hit your Leper Gnome, effectively taking 1 damage because of its armor, and then the death rattle goes through, dealing the 2 additional damage. So the Leper Gnome's not bad. So you want to play this turn 1. Fiery War Axe, you might want to hold on to this, like depending on what your opponent plays. I would say use the Fiery War Axe in response to your opponent. Don't play this outright because it couldn't get oozed. But if they play a creature that you need to Fiery War Axe, the fact that it's only 2 mana just makes this a really good card. And I guess if you have a really, really aggressive card and you feel like if you can read your opponent and you feel like you can rush them down really fast, it might be okay to play this on turn 2. Just use your discretion with the War Axe. Berserker, play this as early as possible, but make sure it's protected. If they have a 3 damage creature, a 3 attack creature on the board, you don't want to play Berserker because it's going to die. Obviously, not worth it. Same with Acolyte of Pain. You want to at least try to draw 2 cards through Acolyte of Pain. Anything above that is just, icing on the cake. If you only draw 1 card, it's a little weak. 3 mana for 1 draw, not very good. Frothing Berserker. Play this and your Whirlwinds for profit. Raging Worgen, same as the Berserker. Make sure it's protected because it's a very strong card. Weaponsmith, you can kind of play this outright. I feel like it's not like a big enough of a bullet magnet to attract too much. Dark Iron Dwarves, make sure you have a creature that you can boost up when you're playing the Dark Iron Dwarf. Cork Run Elite, the fact that it has charge means you can play this I would say you can play this almost always, but similar to the War Axe, play this in response to stuff. But if you need like a little bit more damage to kill your opponent, this is a good way to do it because it's charge. Same goes for the Reaper. Reaper and War Axe are kind of in the same boat because they're weapons. Gurubashi Berserker, this is really strong and sturdy, so try to get this out as fast as possible, and make sure you have a follow-up, like an Inner Rage, a Whirlwind, or a Taskmaster for it. An Argent Commander, this is a card that you don't want to keep on the field for too long because you risk putting its Divine Shield at risk, which, I don't know, it has charge, so play this in response to something. Like, if you have a creature that you need to, like, bulldoze through, Argent Commander is a good card to do that. But anyway, those are the control and aggro decks. Hope you had a better idea of how to go about building decks. My process today was a little rushed because I don't want this video to be too long. But if you have any questions, feel free to leave comments below or shoot me a message on Twitter and I'll try to get back to you. Best of luck with these 2 decks. I'll put the deck list in the comments or the description so you, in case you missed it, you can go through that. But best of luck. The control deck and the aggro deck, these 2 decks are the complete opposite of each other. This is like the extreme ends of the deck spectrum. Most decks are somewhere in between, but I figured by going through the extremes, you get a better idea of how the control and aggro themed decks work. For the next video, part 3, we're going to be playing these decks so you can see them in action, and I'll talk through each of my plays so you can get in my head and see what I'm thinking as I make these plays. But like I said, hopefully these were very helpful in your deck building adventures, and best of luck. The ladder is not something you should be afraid of. Get out there, play, lose, win, learn, and pwn noobs.